do is go over some ground rules. We have a lot of visitors on tonight, so let me go over a couple of items just to help keep order. Everyone, please silence your cell phones, minimize background noise, identify yourself when making comments. When not speaking, please mute yourself. There's an icon on the screen to turn your mic on and off. Please turn it off when you're not speaking. And Greg has the ability to mute you if you are making too much noise. Then you would have to unmute yourself to get back on. At the end of the meeting will be a chance for public comment and questions. And I'm anticipating there's going to be a handful of public comment and questions. And what I would request is that anyone that has a question or a comment, please, if you go to the top of the screen, there's a bar that has a chat section. You can type in that you want to be recognized to make comment, or you can email Greg, and he will recognize you at the end of the meeting. So that being said, do we have any questions? Hearing none. Let me get a quick roll call too. I'll start with Planning Commission members. Alex, you're here.
Here.
Tim.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
John.
Here.
Tony, you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. We have Steve Balla.
Yep.
Okay. Who do we have with the Snyder project?
John Van Luveny.
Tim Snyder, and I just talked to Ken Justice. I guess he never got sent over an invitation, an invite to come on to the meeting. So he's trying to get on and he can't get on. So I don't know if there's any way Greg can make that happen.
I'll look for his. If you can forward me his email real quick address, and I'll get a link to him real quick. And I'll start looking for his email address at the same time.
I got to tell you, Greg, I'm about the worst on a computer. So I got a flip phone, if that tells you how much I like technology. So I can't even, I got no possible way of sending you an email without getting out of recovery.
I might be able to send it, Greg.
All right. So hopefully Ken will be able to hop on here relatively soon.
It's Ken at kmjengineering.com.
All right. We got that. We'll recognize Ken when he joins with us. Who do we have from the Energy Mountain project?
You've got Chuck Beisner and should have Matt Boyes as well.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Matt Boyes. All right. Anybody else want to recognize and stuff? I saw we have Supervisor Collingwood and Supervisor Miller on.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else need to chime in here? If not, we're going to keep moving. So first item on the agenda is a reorganization of the Planning Commission. Do any of the members have any input on that? Make a nomination.
I'll nominate Chris. This is Tim. I'll nominate Chris for chairman.
I'll second that, Alex.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I guess aye. How about the vice chair? I'll make the nomination for Alex Ulmer. Okay, it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. I probably should be asking for other nominations. We typically just say we'll keep the same configuration. Was there any other nominations for chairman? I'm sorry.
I have none.
I dare you. Just kidding.
Please, right?
Any other nominations for vice chair?
No.
All right. Hearing none, we did get a second for Alex. Alex, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then third would be the secretary. Currently it's Tim Ruth.
I'll nominate Tim Ruth.
I'll second that.
Accept the nomination.
Yes.
Any other nominations? All right, all in favor of Tim Ruth for secretary?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, congratulations. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from October 13th. Everybody get a chance to review. Have any questions or comments on it?
I have none, Alex.
Tim, I have none.
Andy, no, they look good.
John, no comment.
Okay, can I get approval? Motion to approve, I'm sorry.
This is
I
Andy on
suppose.
the motion.
Who do we have there? I'm sorry.
Andy made a motion to approve minutes.
And Alex will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so next on the agenda is Snyder Butter Creek Builders. Did Ken happen to join us yet?
I'll be making most of the comments myself, John Van Liveny, so I think we can probably go through this one with, if Ken doesn't make it, I think Tim and I can probably handle it.
I'm here. He's in. He's here.
Good,
All right,
good, wonderful, okay.
all right, John, so you want to kick this off?
Sure. Obviously, all of you are familiar with this property. This is probably the, fourth plan that you've taken a look at, a sketch plan. Tonight, I think we have quite a few fewer issues to discuss than we had the last time we talked with you, which was a couple of months ago. I think it was probably October. This plan was revised. The road configuration is probably the most significant change. What we have now is a P-loop street coming in with a cul-de-sac off of the P-loop. This road configuration is, as Steve notes in his review letter, does conform. The P-loop street and the cul-de-sac street extension are both within the parameters permitted by your ordinance. I'm going to go through the review letter. Most of the review comments are will complies. We have a couple of discussion issues, which I don't think will take very long. The first comment, or actually number 2 in Steve's January 6, 2021 letter, relates to lot number 10, which, as Steve correctly notes, was configured as a lane lot coming in off of Camp Rock Hill Road. The comment was that the ordinance does not allow lane lots in a subdivision which has a new street. We acknowledge that comment, and lot number 10 will be removed from the plan so that the plan will now be a 14 lot plan rather than a 13 or a 15 lot plan. Other than that, we propose to keep the same configuration. Comment number 3.
Hey, John,
Yeah,
can I jump in here?
sure.
So if you're going to eliminate lot 10, or you're going to eliminate that as a flag lot, that means you're going to you're eliminating a lot and they're all going to be connected to the P-loop or
It was lot 10 will become part of lot 11 essentially, and perhaps the lane would become part of lot 12, but I think probably all of it will become part of lot 11.
Let me ask you another question. The first thing that jumped out at me when I saw the new plan was that lane coming in off of Camp Rock Hill Road. And my initial thought was, why didn't we have this on a previous plan to act as your emergency service access? Which,
And I can answer that. If you remember, we had a discussion about the, and I think last time we actually had some photographs to show how very difficult it would be to construct that lane given the natural features that were at that location. Ken, am I correct about that? That's my recollection.
If we did like a 10-foot driveway all the way over to the side, we could have made that work as a driveway. But as far as an access road for emergency vehicles, it never would have met the slope requirements. It's just all big, huge boulders and steep slopes over there.
okay. I see the lane coming in, and I'm,
Yeah.
the first reaction is like, why not make that the emergency lane? You could have.
Yeah, I think last time we talked about that, that was a good discussion point at the last time we had the last plan in here. And at that point, we had some pictures that we had submitted to show you how improbable it was that you would actually construct a decent emergency access meeting the applicable slope criteria.
All right. So again, you're eliminating that lane.
That will be removed on the preliminary plan. That's correct. All right.
Lot 11 and 10 are going to kind of meld together, and you'll have one.
I think that's essentially correct. Yes.
Have one access to the cul-de-sac bulb then.
Correct. That's right.
Create one access.
All right. Comment number 3 is, if you're ready to move on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, let me make a note here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Number 3 talks about, Steve notes that this property has a lot of natural resources and that we need site capacity, natural resource mapping, protection calculations, site capacity calculations. All that is clearly a will comply because it's all required. A and B under that are will complies. C deals again with lot number 10, and as I've said, that'll be removed. Comment number 4 essentially is a comment that says we're going to have to verify that the lots meet the minimum lot area. Again, that's a will comply. That information will have to be provided at preliminary. With respect to the street configuration, I read this essentially as being a comment that I don't think we need to respond to tonight unless there's some new information that has been received since January 6th. But as I've indicated, and I think Steve confirmed in his first comment, this road configuration meets, or we believe that it meets, the applicable road design criteria. So that should eliminate a lot of the discussion that we had about road configuration with the last couple of plans. The cartway width, curb sidewalk. I don't know whether you normally discuss curb and sidewalk and waivers. When we submit the application, we will be submitting a waiver request. If the planning commission has comments with respect to the need for curb or sidewalk, at this point, we certainly can take those into consideration. But Ken, can you respond to the question? It said the last time we had I think we had, if I remember, we showed a curb and sidewalk on one side, if I remember right, or neither rather. Do you have it on one side at this point?
Right now we have it on what would be considered the southern edge all the way along the P-loop and the cul-de-sac, and a partial one side on the northern edge of the P-loop.
Okay. All right.
It can, correct me if I'm wrong, it's on both sides of the cul-de-sac street, is it not?
Yeah, I'm not describing this right. I wish I could be in front of you here. It would be the cul-de-sac would be both sides, and the P-loop would just be, I guess, the outer edge, but not the entire. But when you get to the, I guess the leg that goes up to Camp Rock Hill Road, it'd only be on one side.
Okay, that's the way I read it.
Okay.
And that's what your review comment indicates, Steve. I couldn't read it either, so I was just asking.
Did I describe that all right for everybody? I hope.
So essentially, it's along the frontage of all the lots, the side of the street that the lots are on.
Correct.
And then
correct.
the side of the street at the camp.
Yep.
I certainly don't.
Yeah, I like that description better. Thank you. Yeah,
that's good, Steve. All right. The cul-de-sac turnaround design. Steve indicates that it must be approved by the township. I'm not sure why that's the case. I didn't read that in my subdivision ordinance, but that may be the case. Bottom line is the center of that cul-de-sac bulb is going to be proposed to include a snow storage location, and also some stormwater management facilities. I think, at least at this stage, that's correct. Am I not correct about that, Ken?
Correct.
So is that going to be a grass area in there with stormwater provisions there?
Correct.
the center? Okay. So you'll be able to push snow in there and you'll have some collection.
We'll provide an area, probably an area which is clear so that you can easily push it in there. That's right. That was a comment I saw somewhere in here about the cul-de-sac configuration and need for snow storage provisions. So that's where we're going to do it.
Do we have hang on a second. Sorry. Steve, do we have anything like that in the township now?
We have one street with an island. I can't remember the name of the street. It's the Ingram Bridge development, that cul-de-sac off of Allentown Road or County Line Road. That has an island in the center. It's actually wooded, I think, in that particular.
It is. Yes.
And I think, John, my comment about the township approval is just we don't have, the standard cul-de-sac with just a paved bulb. We have all
Okay. All right.
in the ordinance. We don't for this, so we'd have to come to an agreement on return radiuses and different dimensional aspects.
All right, I didn't see anything in the ordinance that said you couldn't have a center island in a cul-de-sac, but I mean, I respect your comment about the need to make sure the geometry all works. And
and of course, we'd have to decide who maintains that too.
Well, that's a question, and if you want to go that far, we can talk about that. We can talk about it now or later. The intent was to offer the streets for dedication. And the question then, of course, is is the township interested or not interested? That obviously goes to the question then of, do we need a homeowners association or do we not need a homeowners association? And then it also goes to the issue of as you indicated, do we include the island as part of the dedication? Because normally we would. And that same issue is going to come up when we talk about the much larger center of the P-Loop Street. We'll get into that in a few minutes. So we can come back to the issue perhaps at the end of the discussion when we pass through that. Comment number 8 regarding the configuration of the lots, to the extent that we need a waiver for the of the provision that they're supposed to be substantially at right angles, we will be asking for a waiver. When you go around these cul-de-sacs, it's pretty hard to do substantially at right angles. I'm not sure how that's been interpreted in the past, but that will be a waiver request.
Did we have discussion about that at one of our previous meetings with this project?
We did.
I don't recall it. I don't recall specifically.
We did to a certain extent. There were some more oddly configured lots in the past. I think they've been up to a great extent. It's just they're not exactly per the ordinance. Lot 1 is probably the only one that's, the most irregular in shape.
Yeah, lot 1's always been the problematic one as far as shape. This comment's been in all the letters, and we've kind of glanced over it a little bit, knowing that to me, the road's always been the project. If once we get the road situated, then we can make tweaks as needed or request waivers as needed.
Yeah, I'm sure the planning commission members could comment if they desire right now, but the lots have improved from what they had been in the past.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. I was looking at previous plans earlier.
I think this is frankly, it's a better plan in my opinion, but that's only mine, and I'm not a planning commission member or a supervisor. Comment number 9 is the large area in the center of the P-Loop Street. The intent with respect to that area is, number 1, to set aside a portion of it to meet the recreation land requirement, and 2, to use it for stormwater management also. That's how we plan to use that area. I don't know how big that is. Ken, is that about an acre?
Hold on, I can tell you right now. It is it's a little over an acre.
Over an, yeah. Looked about an acre.
1.4 acres, 1.3 acres. Around there.
It is a substantial area. And obviously, there's a number of possibilities there. Number 1, we could call the whole thing, we could dedicate the whole thing to the township. We could dedicate portions of it to one of the lot owners on the other side so that they would have a maintenance responsibility. We could set up a homeowners association. If the township elects not to take the streets, then my view is that that center area would certainly be part of the homeowners association land.
Ken, this is Alex. Question for you on the stormwater. Are you thinking there'd be a basin in there, or would it be more like rain gardens or BMP kind of things?
It's going to be a shallow basin. There'll be two very shallow basins in the P loop and the cul-de-sac, and then the biggest basin will be over there below lot 9. That way we don't have one huge basin. We'll have basically three, one smaller one, and then two really small ones. I guess I always call them pre-basins. In other words, for the lighter storms, just to kind of ease the burden all the way through. They're not going to be very deep.
Gotcha.
We don't have the, I wish we had the soils to do a rain garden, because that'd be perfect, but I don't think we'll get enough infiltration to make that juice worth the squeeze.
How much of that area would be basin?
About a third of it. If you look at if we call north straight up, the southeastern third of it would be basin, and the northwestern 2/3 would be usable for other purposes.
What's the topography of that area, Ken? Is that reasonably flat?
Reasonably flat. It's not. It's a constant slope heading from Camp Rock Hill Road down to there. It's not hilly. There's no rocks. It's pretty wide open. It's a good spot to put it where we put it.
Those
Yeah.
basins would net out on recreational land, I would assume.
Yeah.
Okay, now comment number 10 is the sewage facilities planning module comment, which we obviously recognize. That's a will comply. Comment number 11 is indicated because of the number of building lots being increased to 15, a water resources impact study is required. As I read the ordinance, if we reduce it to 14, it is not required. And that's by elimination of number 10, we eliminate the need for the water resources study.
That would be correct.
Comment number 12 is the question of the P-loop within 52 feet with an 80-foot wide strip of land. And Steve pointed out that the previous plan we talked about essentially having it all right away. That is still, I think, what is proposed, that the whole 80-foot would become the right of way for the entrance road, rather than trying to piece out little pieces of ground and deed them to lot owners on the other side who may or may not want them. And that would be true whether it goes to the homeowners or association or the township. It just seems to us that that's the best way to maintain that area there. 13 is street lighting. Steve indicates that consideration might be given to requirement of street light at the entrance and driveway lamp posts. I think that concept's acceptable, isn't it, Tim?
That's our plan to do that.
Okay. Good.
Hey, John, before we move on, I'd like to go back to 12 for a second.
Sure, absolutely.
With that 52 foot and 80 foot, Steve, would there be any thought to putting the 52 foot and the roadway right against the inner circle and then stretching the right away back onto the adjoining properties?
I'm not sure I understand.
I don't understand that either.
What I guess I'm saying is if you were to push the road to the inside of that and then have the additional space all right of way on the adjoining properties on the outside of the P loop.
Well, that's what I think we're talking about. I mean, the 80 foot is the entrance itself. That little leg that comes in off of Camp Rock Hill Road. That's where we have the 80 feet. And I think the issue there is, are we going to center a 52 foot right of way and end up with what, 13 feet, 14 feet on either side of the right of way, or are we going to just dispose of the whole thing and call the whole thing 80 foot wide a right of way? I think that's the question. Because
Right, once you get back by the lot,
the Snyder doesn't own either side, so you would have to convince a property owner on another side, either to to add that ground to his property, or you'd have to create an association to own and maintain that strip. If it's a private street, that's easy. And if it's a private street, we're clearly going to have that as right of way, or it's going to be dedicated association. It wouldn't matter whether it was right of way or dedicated ground at that point. Township takes it, that's a different issue that needs to be reviewed.
That was my point, was that if we could put the roadway against the inside of the P, then it would leave all of the right of way on someone else's property. They could more easily maintain it than having to cross the street to deal with right of way on the opposite side.
All right.
Yeah.
What you're suggesting, for example, is lot number one would own that whole little stretch. As an example, if we move the right of way to the east, lot number one would own the 28-foot strip going out to Camp Rock Hill Road. Is that essentially what you're saying, or the other way around?
John, actually, the reason why I'd be reluctant to push the road all the way far to the east is that the next lot over that house is fairly close to that setback line.
Sure.
So I wanted to keep the road just a little bit more distance from the neighboring property there. That's all.
Yeah, I understand. But I guess you could push it to the west. I mean, it's the same
I could
principle.
go that way. Pushing to the west would be okay if you wanted a wider strip unused, but the only reason, Mr. Ulmer, that I didn't put it further to the east was because of the proximity of the neighboring house there. Just would put it closer to them. That's all. Sure.
My comment from having gone through this for years and years with a number of different subdivisions is the problem you have when you do that. If it's not dedicated to the township and maintained or owned by a homeowners association, and you give it to one property owner, the entire subdivision suffers if that person doesn't maintain it properly. So we would have to, at a minimum, put a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions that would be recorded against that lot so that other property owners would have the right to maintain that and force that person to do his job. So it's a little problematic. I think if the township took it or if the homeowners association were created to maintain private roads, then that would be the easiest solution. We'd have to think twice the other way around. But I understand the point, and I think your point may make some sense. It'd be a 28-foot strip, something like that, Ken, if we moved it all the way to the west?
Yes, sir.
And that strip would be owned by lot 15?
If we moved it to the west, it'd have to be owned by lot 15. That's right. That would have to be that way, I think. Why they do it, I'm not sure.
Just and not to get off the subject of what we're talking about, but it's related. I'm not sure that even if the township took the roads, we wouldn't want to see a homeowners association to maintain the basins and this rec area land. And if
I understand that, Steve, and that's the point that we're trying to decide. We need to decide what the responsibilities are going to be, and that may be the biggest plan from a planning standpoint. That may be the question that would be nice to know the answer to before we even filed the plan, but it's not going to change the plan that much. I mean, if the association owned it, if I lived in there, I think I'd want to know that my neighbors and I had the ability to control what that looks like there so that the entrance is guaranteed to be well maintained. I might not even trust the township.
Right, because then you could landscape it nice and have a well-kept entrance to the community.
I think regardless of the disposition, I think the well-maintained entrance is going to be important.
I would agree.
All right, comment, street lighting, that's a 14 riparian buffer. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, John. Getting back to street lighting. Where the cul-de-sac meets the P loop and where the P loop intersects back on itself, is it uncommon to have lighting at those intersections?
Not in my experience. No.
It would make sense to have some type of
three standard lights: the main entrance, the P loop connection, and the cul-de-sac off the P loop, and then driveway lampposts at the rest of the driveway. Right.
I think that would make sense.
And that's pretty standard in my experience with developments like this.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Riparian, number 14, riparian buffer, that's a comment and that's a will comply. 15, as I've indicated, we intend to provide, meet the recreation land requirement with use of part of the center of the P-loop. 16 is just citing a requirement for a narrative summary of the development with preliminary plan. That's a will comply. Public notice, that's a requirement, so that's obviously a will comply. That's number 17. E&S plan, we all know, is a requirement. That's a will comply. Waivers, we will have to submit when we do the preliminary plan. We'll submit the waiver request and justification for the waivers. And 20 is a requirement for concrete monuments rather than iron pins. And again, that's a will comply, or we'd have to ask you for a waiver. So, I said, I really think the ownership of the streets is probably the biggest issue here.
Yeah, it's been recent policy that the township wants the roads.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Well, I
That's
think
fine.
and that is correct. We've gone away from private roads for the most part, except for in like age-restricted communities. But I think even though the dimensionally or lengthwise, the P-loop and the cul-de-sac meet the requirements, we still want to hear from the fire company that they're satisfied with emergency services. And I guess just in general, I'd like to hear if the planning commission has any qualms or concerns or feels this is a better layout than the single cul-de-sac street length.
Well, any of the planning commission members have input on this?
I'll give you my 2 cents worth. This is Alex. I like this layout better simply because we're complying with the existing standards or much closer to it, and we're not setting precedent for something else. I mean, looking at the steep slopes, it looks like it's going to be pretty much impossible to get a secondary emergency access in there. But with that nice wide P-loop, I think we're doing a much better job of being able to provide emergency access.
This is John. To be honest with you, functionally to me, this plan looks like the last one and the one before that and the one before that. The distance between Camp Rock Hill Road and lot number 9's driveway is still more than 850 feet. When you turn in off of Camp Rock Hill Road, the first sign you're going to see is no outlet. And I'm just not comfortable at all in this design that doesn't have a secondary outlet. It's just too big and it's just too restricted.
Anyone else?
Chris, this is Andy. That's been the thing that I've been wrestling with, reviewing this. So the last line of from the minutes of our last meeting, it was the consensus of PC that we would not be agreeable to recommending approval of the excessive length of the proposed cul-de-sac street unless an emergency access was provided. So we, there is we do have the P-loop in there. I'm inclined to mirror John's Swearduck's comments, and I'm not thrilled with it.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, this is Tim. So whereas it's an improvement, I think, over previous plans, again, I'm along the same lines as I think Andy and John, that doesn't quite hit what our intent was with that emergency access and the secondary access to the to the whole development. So like I said, whereas it is an improvement over what we've seen before, not so sure I'm fully on board with it.
Okay.
Steve, question for you. The existing approved subdivision had a P-loop and only had one access, correct?
Correct.
And that P-loop was way down near like where lot 10 and 11 are now?
Well, it's essentially just imagine the P-loop that you see now, much larger, because it had a couple couple lots in the center of it.
Gotcha.
Did
But
it have a
essentially,
cul-de-sac hanging off of it?
I think in a similar location, maybe a little bit further, but just a
There was no cul-de-sac off. I could show you. I have the old plan here. Are you able to see my screen if I pull it up?
I don't know if Greg has that allowed, but you're right. There was no cul-de-sac. It was only a P-loop street, but essentially it came into the same location and split in a similar location. It just was expanded to take up most of the lot.
Yeah, I went down further below where you see the words lot 2, cut across where you see the words lot 6, lot 8. It kind of cut back up again over where you saw lot 13 and came back in again. So it was a much bigger P loop with no cul-de-sac, but only one access off of Camp Rock Hill Road.
Well, the plan on the screen is the one we're reviewing tonight.
Correct.
Anyone else? Did we get everybody? Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously this is a better plan than what we've seen. It's still like the three of our members have said. You know, it's still not hitting the goal of being such a large development with the one access. We're not getting that emergency access that we were hoping for to approve this. I think having that P loop and cul-de-sac, we certainly have allowed for better emergency access, but I don't think it's perfect for emergency access. And I don't know how the boys above us feel about it either. But you're hearing from 5 members who, for the most part, are still a bit uncomfortable with what you've proposed.
I understand that. And do I also understand that your belief would be the preference, the township would prefer to take dedication of the road, but to have the both sides of the entrance road maintained by a homeowners association, probably the center of the P loop, and how about the center of the cul-de-sac? Well, assuming that we do that, would you prefer to have that also be a homeowners association maintenance issues? Is that the consensus? Assuming we proceed with this plan?
I would say, I would say yes. Road dedication to the township and maintenance of the cul-de-sac P loop and entry right away by the homeowners association.
Okay. Right.
That's me. Any other input from planning commission?
I would agree with that, Chris. Alex.
Yeah, this is Tim. If this were to proceed, I would agree with that as well.
Okay.
This is Steve. I would only add that potentially the basins would be HOA controlled instead of a
I
burden.
understand. I understood that, Steve. Yeah, that would be part of that would also be subject to HOA control. I would agree with that. Yeah. With the township having a stormwater maintenance, operation and maintenance agreement, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I think that's what we wanted to discuss tonight. So we'll make a decision and you probably will see us again.
Well, and we'll, from the township standpoint, at least from mine, I'll continue to see if we get comments from the fire company on this latest layout. And when I do, I will forward that to everyone.
Thank you.
Before you go, Steve, has the road crew had a chance to look at this plan?
I did not talk to them specifically about this plan, but from prior discussions, he said they were more concerned with just that they were a place to put the snow. They more or less said they could plow anything as long as they have somewhere to put the snow.
Snow easements. We want snow easements.
Right.
We'll give you a snow easement.
All right. Good enough.
Very good. Thank you.
All
Can I
right.
make a comment while we're on this? While
Yeah,
I'm
go
still on, while you're still on, can I get a question in here? I'm trying to understand. I understand the concerns that were brought up. The original P loop was 3,100 feet long. So those houses were 1,500 feet from the entrance leg. You had the 400, you had the 500-foot entrance leg, plus you had 3,100 foot. So those houses were further away on that approved one than we are now at the end of the cul-de-sac. And the road standards, I believe, Steve can answer this better than me probably, and maybe John. The road standards in the code and the ordinances haven't changed greatly, in the sense that cul-de-sac length is still 800 feet. It was back then. P-loop is 3,000 feet. It was back then. The entrance leg is 500 feet. It was back then. Curb and sidewalk was required back then. I believe it was just waived because, yes, it was required back then. So we haven't had a lot of changes. When we first came with the cul-de-sac, which was 1,700 feet long, the concern was the fire, the emergency services, which we understood that. Now we've taken care of that emergency service concern because literally they have two ways in from the cul-de-sac. I'm trying to understand what the standard change from the P-loop that was originally approved to this one, which the only thing I saved here is not disturbing 1,900 feet of road. So I'm trying to understand, does this board then want the road that was originally designed, basically? Is that what you're looking for? You would rather have a longer road? You would rather disturb all this other forested area? Because unless somebody, John, I would like you to explain to me how this is more or less acceptable than what we originally did, please.
Who are you asking? I'm sorry, Tim.
Tim?
Did we lose Tim?
Tim, are you still there?
Yeah, my mic didn't want to turn back on. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Who was that question directed at?
Well, I guess it's directed at all the four or five board members that kind of said they weren't happy with the plan and would like the access. But John was the one who kind of led that conversation. So I'd kind of like to. I guess I'm asking from the ones that weren't real thrilled with the design as opposed to the old design.
Okay, so
that's who.
All right, I'll take my shot at that. So 2 comments. First of all, for the folks that are living on the cul-de-sac or will be living on the cul-de-sac, that circle in the middle doesn't do anything because there's still a single path out, whether it's really on one side of the circle, the other side of the circle, on either side of the circle, it's still a single road. So it's really a single access to the cul-de-sac that's more than 850 feet, which is the standard. With regard to the P-loop plan, I'm going to have to beg off and say I wasn't a member at the time, so I'm not familiar with that plan. So I can't comment on what the thinking of the board members were at the time on why that plan was approved. All I can tell you is from my perspective, I'm not comfortable with this plan. Now, if anybody else wants to comment on that.
Tim, this is Andy Ensha. From my perspective, I've been township resident for 20 years. Back where I live off of Clymer Avenue, there was an instance, probably about 10 years ago right now, where some power lines came down over Detweiler Road, and the development was cut off for a certain amount of time, and there wasn't 2 access points. I had to walk a ways to get picked up to go to work. I recognize here that, you know, you can't identify all of the risks that are associated with it, but I can tell you that I've seen it happen, and that's influencing my decision to look for 2 points of emergency access, and that's kind of where I'm coming from.
If you don't mind me asking, does that mean that all P loops then you wouldn't accept no matter what we did?
For that, we're evaluating this on a plan by plan basis. I'm not going to comment on that. I'm approaching this and trying to look at every plan with an open mind, and then I try to evaluate it based upon precedent and ordinances and my interpretation and my opinion. So that's where I'm coming from here. Am I going to say any and all P loops ever? No, I'm going to evaluate every plan on a for its own merits based upon all the information.
Thank you.
Tim, this is Tim Ruth. So, whereas my comments were, it certainly is better, and I do think it is better. There's the concern for the emergency access, and weighing in the fact that you're doing less environmental disturbance, is a good thing. So I think there's positives both ways, but the emergency access was one of the primary considerations and objections over the last several plans that we've seen, and it does not technically do that with the secondary access, but yet there are some positives to the plan.
I understand those comments and I appreciate them, but I just keep going back to our original cul-de-sac. The true original issue, the major issues were fire, emergency services, and snow removal and that kind of stuff. The emergency access came in after it was mentioned at the first meeting, but 4 board members that were there were, all 4 of you said you like the plan because of that. It didn't disturb, it didn't destroy so much. It took the property and the neighbors into consideration. Basically, what you're saying is, just as Ken, if I'm understanding this, just as Ken had said, a P-loop is the only choice here for the use of the property. And a P-loop is a length, and under a certain length, you don't have to have the emergency, at least in the ordinance. And I do understand your concerns, but I think we've talked about this even at the first meeting about emergency services, and if power lines go down and trees crossing the road, in the new road, everything's underground. So the likelihood, there's no bridges, there's no nothing. So the likelihood of this new road being blocked from any natural or electrical issue is extremely slim. I guess that's where I'm struggling. I'm trying to meet the heart of the ordinance, which is to protect the natural, or we are trying to meet this, protect the natural resources as much as possible. And I keep going back to, that's why you had, John, that's why you had so many cul-de-sacs, because the first cul-de-sac at the first meeting, if you go back and look at the minutes, all 4 board members said they liked the design. They were worried about the length of the cul-de-sac, and I understand that. But I thought that's why I kept shrinking the cul-de-sac to try to meet the length. And the standards are very difficult to or almost impossible to comply with in that sense. To have, you see the property, you see the accesses. I have a creek on one side, so I can't make that road, and we have steep slopes, and we have hills and boulders on the other access. So we can argue that I designed the property. Right? Go ahead. What's that?
The whole bottom 20% of the property is all wetlands too, that we're trying to stay out of.
We're trying to stay out of that. Absolutely. We are literally trying to work. I mean, as you know, we don't want to come, we didn't want to come here 5-6 times, obviously. We have done everything to reduce the road and stormwater and natural destruction of the property as much as possible. Is there a chance that someday that road gets bought? We're planting trees along the road. Township requirements require me to plant trees on the road. 50 years from now, 70 years from now, one of those trees can fall over. Does that mean we don't build roads anymore? Does that mean we don't plant trees on the right of way? I mean, where is the point of rationale, I guess? And please don't get offended by my comments. They're not meant to in any kind of arrogance. I'm just trying to understand, knowing and seeing the property. And again, I didn't make the Camp Rock Hill Road and the Butter Creek Road side. Those boundary lines were all set. The only side from my original subdivision is the west side. That wouldn't help us. To go west doesn't help us with anything. So I guess where we're at, we've redesigned so many times based upon what you've said, what this board has said. So now we're to the point where I guess I'm saying to you, what do you want? I mean, we have a cul-de-sac. A P-loop is it. It's a cul-de-sac or a P-loop. We understood the township or the board was against cul-de-sacs. Okay, I get that, or longer cul-de-sacs. So we came up with this. So where do we go from here? Do you want the big P-loop that tears up half the woods? And I guess the simplest solution is we tried to put it in the plan, a copy of the old one, but we didn't want to confuse with the fact that you think we're resubmitting the old one and the new one, why you have two plans. But I guess, and I kind of assumed that the board members had gone back and looked at the original subdivision that was approved. Because if that's the P-loop you want, then it does the same thing. It's the same number of lots. Everything stays the same. It just meets all your requirements, but it's still a P-loop. And it's still 3,000 foot long loop. So we're not actually getting further from the road by it. So I guess my question finishing this is, where to go? I need some advice. We need some advice from the board, and an emergency access doesn't work. I mean, there's nowhere to put it. So what's your advice for us?
So my original question from the beginning of the meeting, this driveway that you were proposing for lot 10, you telling me that only going to be 10 foot wide and you can do that?
Yeah,
Well, the nice thing about go ahead, Tim. Nice thing about it can go around a tree, it can go around a rock, it can go 15% slope, 12. I don't know what the requirements are in the township, but if there's a small area that's a little bit different, it has to wind around. I have that luxury. I don't have to put ditches. I don't have to put swales on the side. And it's not 15 foot wide. So I can go around some areas if I have to jog.
So for an emergency access, I mean, it doesn't have to be a standardly built road, does it? I'm asking Steve.
Yes.
No, it does not. But it does, and we've struggled with this in some other developments. It does need to be configured and at least wide enough that'll get the emergency service vehicles through it. So, I mean, Ken is correct. It probably, a meandering 10-foot wide driveway may not be enough, but you're correct. It doesn't have to be a 16 or 18 foot wide, cartway, a regulation street that goes through there. It's somewhere in between, but you need to show that a reasonable sized vehicle. You might not take the ladder truck back there, but you need to get an ambulance or a pumper truck or an engine through there. That would have to meet those standards.
Right.
And it would have to be
But
maintained.
isn't that why we're putting a 28-foot wide road in?
What was that, Tim? I'm sorry.
Isn't that one of the reasons for the road, you know? I'm sorry to interrupt. Isn't that one of the reasons for a 28-foot wide road, that we really have 3 lanes? If need be in an emergency, plus the shoulder? I mean, we certainly, you got an 8-foot fire truck. We could stack them 3 wide and still have room on the road. So we could certainly get emergency services. We could certainly get cars passed. So I thought having that wider road was what made everybody, the township, comfortable with all these kind of roads, in the sense of you have the emergency access. I mean, what if the cul-de-sac to 30 feet wide? I mean, that would give you an extra 2 feet. I mean, that would certainly hold 6-foot wide vehicle. Cars are 6 foot wide. You're looking at stacking 5 of them. I mean, right now we can get easily 4 vehicles across that road. So I'm trying to understand, and I'm again not being smart, and I understand. I do fully understand, and I live back here, and I told you I was on a road where the cops said no, you can't go out. So, but where it comes to the point of, again, where does it come to the point? I'm to a huge P. The idea really hating this property. The other thing, I don't like houses in the middle of the P loop. What was designed before, that's one of the reasons it didn't get built. To be quite honest with you, it was not a nice design. And it disturbed so much of the property. But again, the engineer didn't take any time. He just laid it out and met requirements for the most part. And that was it. Ken took a lot of time to draw these things up, to try to salvage something out of here. But a 28-foot wide road gets us emergency. I mean, it certainly makes 3 lanes.
This is Steve. If I could comment on the width issue, I understand, Tim, what you're describing. In the case of a car that breaks down, or someone that's parked on the road, or a large truck that's parked on the road, a moving van that's parked out on the road, you're right that the road width makes it wide enough that you could get around it. Fire services, be that as it may, they'll block a 50-foot wide road if you build a 50-foot wide road. Once they put the outriggers out, once they lay their lines, that road is effectively blocked off by fire services. We can't make a road big enough to get around fire services, nor would they want people in the area. That's the difficulty, and why the road width doesn't always lend itself to fire services issues. That's why we look for an alternate way in that would get people in or out when the fire service is set up, because it's not like it used to be. They come in force and they block everything.
By the same token, Steve, this layout does meet the International Fire Code requirements. There's no limitation as far as the length of a cul-de-sac in the fire code. All it requires is a hard surface 20-foot wide access point that comes to within, I think it's 150 feet of the house. So what we have here certainly meets all the fire code requirements.
I want to respond back to Tim's comments, because, I mean, first and foremost, I hear your frustration and I understand your frustration. But at the same point, we had this discussion last time. And to be honest with you, when I opened up and I saw this drawing, I was totally flabbergasted, because it looked like you didn't listen to the comments that we gave you last month. And what you did was you put a circle in the middle of a long cul-de-sac, thinking that was somehow or another going to resolve the issues. And I'm looking at this very literally. And I understand all your rationalizations about why you think your solution is more practical than what the code states. But the bottom line is you have to meet the letter of the code.
But we did, John.
Well, that's the
This
point.
design-
I think that's where we have to stop the discussion, because I believe that we have met the code, and ultimately that this plan is fully compliant. So that may be where we have to stop. We may have a difference of opinion, but if there's no better solution, and there clearly isn't a solution to get an emergency access here, if we meet the letter of the ordinance, design a preliminary plan that otherwise meets the ordinance requirements, it'll have to be approved. Your ordinance does not have a provision that says what we propose here doesn't conform to the code. It does. There's no question about it. That's why this configuration was submitted this time.
I respectfully disagree.
I mean,
with
we have your comments. I think we're just going to have to go back and make a decision. Tim will have to make a decision based on your comments, because what you're saying now, as I understand it, is there is no solution. Given this property, I don't see any solution beyond having the P-loop that stops where it is with no cul-de-sac. Your emergency access point is not written into your ordinance. I mean, other than that, if that were a requirement, a single access development served by a P-loop would not meet what you're saying is the required design criteria. And that doesn't make any sense either.
your comment about not a solution. There may not be a solution that you like, but there are other solutions. There may not be a 15-lot solution here. There may be something less than that. That I understand why that's not preferable to you, but that is a solution.
So what is the solution? Why, I mean, if you could articulate it, we could take it into consideration. What do you think the solution is? Because I'm not clear. We still have a single access, even if we stopped it at the P-loop. You still have your concern. You have a single access.
But you're less than
Without an
850
emergency
feet from
access,
the road.
you couldn't. What?
You're less than 850 feet from the road. So that meets the requirement. If you eliminate the cul-de-sac.
Well, then, but well, then we'd have to stretch the P-loop again, and we'd still meet the ordinance. I just don't follow.
Yeah,
I mean,
John, I mean, we could bigger P-loop. If it has a bigger P-loop, I could put the original P-loop in, and it still has one entrance leg, 3,500 feet long,
same issue.
or 3,200. I'm allowed a 30-foot long road.
And that's
What's
what
that, John?
That's what you said you were going to do last time. You still have the option of that.
No,
plan.
it's not. It's what I said I didn't want.
We didn't want to do it
It's
because
what I
we
said I
impact
didn't want to
on
do,
the
and I
natural
guess
feature.
John and I are saying the same thing. We're trying to say we're still got one entrance leg. Whether I make the P-loop 3,000 feet long or 4,000 feet or 3,500 feet long, which is allowed without an access, without an emergency access, or I make the P-loop 1,500 feet and I have the 800, still well under that 3,500 foot allowable P-loop with the 13 homes. So I guess I understand your concerns, but I'm trying to. That P-loop meets your requirements. This whole road, this design meets your requirements. The big P-loop meets your requirements, John. So if I come in with a plan and with a big P-loop on it, are you going to say, well, that's great, but we still have one access, so we need emergency access? The problem is I'm not required. It's not required. In this township, in your zoning, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. John, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not required. I'm allowed to do 3,500 foot P-loop. Why does that make sense? To destroy 1,900 feet of woods. I'm doing this not to save money. I'm doing this not to take more lots off. I'm doing this because it makes sense for crying out loud. The road goes right in the middle. All the road is in where the drainage is now on the property. Where everything, the elevations work great. The houses are set in the right spots. Everything's sloped towards the road for the most part. Stormwater becomes so much easier. But you start to take that road another, 1,500 foot longer or 1,200 foot longer, that's a lot more disturbance, a lot more of everything. I guess that's our point. We have one leg, no matter what, it's coming in. It meets the requirements. One cold P loop, 3,500 foot long, 3,000 foot loop, and a 500 foot leg. That's in your requirements. That's what I'm allowed to do. Is that what you want? You prefer that? It still comes out the one spot.
Well, Tim, I think the point is you're allowed
And
to
that's
do what
why-
you're doing here. You're allowed to do what you're doing here too.
I
John,
agree with that, but they don't. So I'm
Well, it's,
A comment I would make would be the P loop gives you access from wherever the P loop reaches back to the entrance area. Whereas the
Right.
cul-de-sac does not. The cul-de-sac, you have to get back to the P loop. The P loop itself gives you that emergency access all the way around to the point of where it intersects the lane coming in.
but it's 1,500 foot
I
long.
understand that.
So you're 1,500 foot away.
That's
Either
your-
way,
That's your emergency then.
I'm
That's your
sorry.
access. That's you're breaking up, Tim. I'm sorry.
But you still have one leg going out to Camp Rock Hill, which sounds like that's the issue.
No, I don't think that's the ultimate issue. I think that the ultimate issue is there's so many homes on this that would not have access until they hit the P loop. Anything that's not on that P loop is hung to dry.
but that's the same as if we had a single cul-de-sac coming in off a public street. I mean, I don't see the
Understand
difference.
that, and that's got to be 800 feet long.
Well, that's what this is.
Yeah, in 800 feet, you can have 12 houses. I only have 6 houses. We only have 6 houses on the cul-de-sac. The other 6 come
Correct.
off the P loop. So
Yeah.
they are access. So we have cut this, John, your point. We cut this down now. We had 13 or 12 homes on the cul-de-sac. We now have only 6 homes on the cul-de-sac. The rest of
I
them
think you
are on
only
the
have,
P
I
loop,
think you may only have 5, Tim, if I count them right.
or 5.
I mean, you treat lot number 14 actually.
I only have
touches the
5.
P-loop too.
I only have 5
Yeah.
on the cul-de-sac. We have 5 on the
Correct.
cul-de-sac now as opposed to 12.
Yep.
So we
Well, there's more
have
driveways than that on
done
the
what you
cul-de-sac.
have
That's all
reduced.
right.
What's that?
I said there's more driveways that come to the cul-de-sac, but in any event, I think
Yeah, there are.
you've made your points known. The planning commission has made their comments, and as Mr.
Yeah.
Van Lubeni said earlier, I think you need to go back and consider what direction you want to take and proceed that way. Obviously, we're not.
Yeah.
Neither
We're
side
not
is,
going to resolve it here.
is changing their opinion tonight.
That's correct.
No, and I agree with that, and I'm sorry I let it drag on so long. But things needed to be said. So yeah, if you guys are all right with this moving forward and coming back with whatever you decide to come up with, I
Yep.
think we've gone as far as we can tonight.
I think you have to. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
good enough. Thank you. Have a great night. All right. Greg, we don't have any public comments on that one, do we?
Not on this one.
All right. Not yet. All right. So moving forward, next on the agenda is Energy Mountain. Who do we have representing?
Hi everyone, this is Matt Boyes, Director of Development at GlidePath, who's the developer for Energy Mountain. And we also have Chuck on the line. He's our primary consultant with Westwood.
All right. Why don't you start off and give us an overview of what you're looking to do here.
Perfect. Yeah. So like I said, my name is Matt Boyes. I'm the Director of Development at Glide Path Power Solutions. I've been in the energy industry about 10 years. I primarily work on utility scale wind, solar, and battery storage. I've worked for some of the larger renewable energy developers in the US, and most recently with Glide Path for about 2 years or so. I'll give a little background on Glide Path. We are an independent power producer. As far as independent power producers go, we're a little bit smaller, but our specialty and forte is really in battery storage, and that's really where we excel and have built the majority of our business in the battery storage space. As a company, we were founded back in 2015, where we developed the very first 2 battery storage projects in the United States, just outside of Chicago, which is where we are based out of, one of the suburbs in Chicago. That's Elmhurst. I'm coming to you from my living room in Minnesota, Minneapolis here. So Glide Path, we own and operate and develop and construct wind, solar, and primarily battery storage. We have about 500 megawatts of operating assets, a few hundred megawatts of battery storage projects that are currently operating in the US and our territories, and have a development pipeline of around 3 gigawatts, so 3,000 megawatt hours of battery storage across the United States. I saw recently that we were doing some market analysis, and I think we've built about 13% of all battery storage projects across the United States, just to give kind of some context of who we are, what our capabilities are, and what type of projects we work on. For diving into kind of energy storage or Energy Mountain, I'd like to kind of just start off with what battery storage is, why the electricity grid needs it, the importance of it, and how it's going to really be part of the 21st century electric grid, if that's all right with everyone. So battery storage is a very much a growing industry. There's a growing need for it for the electric grid. So we aren't talking here about a behind the meter type of battery storage project, or a battery pack that you put in your home or at a facility, kind of like a backup diesel generator. This type of facility, although it uses the same technology, it's primarily for the use of utilities and will participate in the larger electricity market, which is PJM. Pennsylvania is included in PJM, which is a 13-state electricity market. It's actually the largest electricity market in the world. So what happens is independent power producers like ourselves who have generation assets, whether it's wind, solar, natural gas, hydro, battery storage. These independent power producers, along with utilities, produce energy. It's bought and sold on the grid in a pretty liquid marketplace. And at all times, all of these independent power producers are following kind of the baseline rules of PJM. And some of those are PJM regulates this power industry, who rolls up to FERC, which is the federal agency that regulates electricity. And one of their primary goals as an energy regulator is to ensure that the grid maintains reliability at all times. And so that is this balancing act of supply and demand to ensure that anytime you turn on your electricity at home, you fire up your AC or your furnace, that you're not going to cause a blackout, and that there's always going to be power. So that balancing of the grid is traditionally been serviced by expensive fossil fuel generators, whereas as we're seeing with the drastic decrease in the cost for lithium ion batteries, battery storage is going to play a great role in replacing some of the most expensive energy units on the grid. So not only will this help drive costs down for ratepayers in the long run, but it'll help decrease energy waste. It'll remove unnecessary greenhouse gases that are burning as part of spinning reserves. These facilities don't use water. They don't emit any type of pollutants or emissions. They're quite steady state. They use the same technology, the lithium ion battery that's in our cell phones and your computer, electric car batteries. So the technology has been around for a long time. It's just really a newer use in terms of an application, because we've seen a drastic drop in the cost of lithium ion batteries. So this type of facility, I like to use the metaphor that battery storage is similar to a water tower, and that water towers are strategically located where generally there's population centers, and they provide a balancing for the water system so that there's always water pressure when you use your water. In the same way, these battery storage facilities will balance the grid by pulling energy off the grid and then releasing that energy back onto the grid as required via various market signals and feedback, whether that's a need for 4 hours of energy or a need to help regulate the frequency of electricity at a millisecond level. So there's a lot of capabilities that battery storage provides to the grid that adds a lot of value in helping maintain grid reliability, reducing costs, and help really just improving resiliency and moving the electric grid to the 21st century. They also can help reduce the need for replacing other infrastructure on the electric grid, such as power substations that need upgrades, transmission lines, or where there's congestion. Battery storage can play a role. So we do have, I'd like to just call out to, we do have a website set up for this project just to help answer questions, help public further understand kind of what type of facility this is, because it is new. When, you know, often at every one of our permitting hearings similar to this, it's a concept that is heard for the first time by the Planning Commission, by the public. Most of the projects that we have are the first of their kind. We take pride in trying to be an early mover in markets. This project specifically, we started developing over 2 years ago, and have been studying various aspects of the project for over 2 years now. I anticipate that we would not proceed with construction, presuming approval and acceptance at the local level here for even another 12 months or so. These are long development projects. They take years to study. They're large CapEx projects with long lifespans. This facility, you know, we foresee a 20 to 30 year lifespan of the project. So that website Yeah, I think I see a comment there. The website is energymountain.info. And on there, we talk kind of get more into the details of what type of services battery storage provide in the role of them going forward with the electricity grid. So the facilities themselves are actually quite simple, although they provide a lot of benefit and interest to electric engineers and at the very nerdy level. And I will quickly run out of my expertise in terms of, frequency regulation and some of the micro details of the design. But from a macro level, and you can see in the site plan here, it looks a little busy, but on our website, we have a couple pictures. The website for our company is glidepath.net. You can see other pictures of what these facilities look like. But generally what the facility is includes a perimeter fence for access purposes so that we limit access. Specialized battery storage containers that look very much like a shipping container, but they're specifically designed to house lithium-ion batteries. Inside the containers, they very much look like your standard server rack that you would see, at a data center. So they're just racks of lithium-ion batteries in various containers. Each container has an HVAC unit to make sure that we optimize the temperature, just like you would with your computers. It has a little fan to make sure that it optimizes the temperature of the battery. These units all have individual HVAC. So those specialized battery storage containers will sit on cement pads. In between all the cement pads, we typically just have gravel, some type of stone or rock. And then we have about 2 to 4 of the battery storage containers will connect underground with some underground cabling into inverters. And then those inverters will will really connect with underground cabling to our project substation, which it hits the transformer. And then that transformer moves the electricity up to a transmission level. And then there'll be a couple poles that will connect to the existing substation there that's adjacent to the site. So again, the project is all steady state. There's no liquids in the batteries. The batteries the whole facility itself is monitored 24/7. There are a host of redundancies from a safety perspective. So each container can operate independently of the others, and we monitor actually down to the individual cell level of the batteries, because we can just pull out and put new batteries in if they're underperforming, or if they need to be augmented over time, which is expected. That we are just like you would your cell phone battery. It has a lifespan, and we expect that the lifespan of these lithium-ion batteries would be replaced over the life, that 20 to 30-year life of the project. If for any reason the facility loses connection with our 24/7 monitoring, of which we have at least 2 ways to connect to the facility remotely, then the facility goes into automatic, basically safe mode, where it just shuts down. It doesn't discharge energy. It won't charge the batteries. So that is its default safe mode for any reason, even if it's just a connectivity issue with our monitoring system. So the system itself will not be staffed. we'll have operations and maintenance crew that will visit periodically. Generally, that's once a month that a crew will go out there and just make sure that the facility is operating as it should and perform routine maintenance. The facility doesn't use water, so there's no need for any sewer, whether that's, you know, bringing water in or out. And the facility won't produce any emissions on site as well. I'd just like to talk a little bit about, you know, why this location. So from a higher level, so looking at the entire state, generally how we site projects is we first look at the entire electric grid and we analyze all of the substations to see where the highest value for battery storage would be. So if we were put this facility anywhere in the state, where could we get the most value in terms of the services that the facility provides? And that also means that we are looking at locations in an ideal world adjacent to existing electrical substations. That way we reduce the need for any additional infrastructure, such as you know, your standard transmission line, your 34 kV transmission line and poles, if this facility were not adjacent to an electrical substation. Because being adjacent to an electrical substation, we can then, with minimal additional poles, connect right to that sub, and that's where we pull the energy off the grid and then put the energy back onto the grid as required. So this is a checks nearly every box from our siting perspective when we look at alternative sites for this type of project in the state. It's adjacent to a substation. We've performed a lot of site due diligence in terms of phase 1, wetland delineations, landowner participation, and its adjacent nature to that Bucks Mount substation. The other common question that I'd like to address is, you know, does this thing produce noise? Can you see it from the neighbors? You know, what type of impacts are going to be felt within, you know, 500 feet or so? And fortunately, this is a much easier conversation that I generally get into, especially with wind farms with 500-foot towers. But here, the containers are going to be max 10 feet, even from the cement pad that they're on. So the entire facility itself, the only equipment that will be over 10 feet are going to be a couple of the inverter and a couple of the transmission poles that will then connect to the existing substation. However, since that our project substation will be adjacent to the existing substation, we feel that that impact visually won't be all that different from how it currently sits. We also will plan to add, as part of our project, as we continue to add detail, a landscaping plan, which would include visual barriers, you know, as needed for the project. So there will be, you know, a perimeter fence, of which, you know, if the township would like us to have certain colors to, you know, further reduce visual impacts, we're happy to follow along there, as well as, you know, taking input in terms of various shrubs and landscaping to further reduce that visual impact, again, with almost the entirety of the facility being less than 10 feet. And then again, I'd just like to address common questions. Will the facility have any noise impacts? The answer is there will be some noise, yes, but it is ambient in nature, and we will actually it won't be all that much different from the noise of the existing substation as it sits there today. There will be some low humming from the HVAC units, not all that different from an HVAC unit on a residential home, or I should say a small kind of commercial facility. Each one of these battery containers, as I mentioned, has typically 2 HVAC units. We've found that we're able to reduce noise even further by having smaller HVAC units, which we can control individually, as opposed to a facility that would have a larger HVAC unit that is running constantly. So by placing 2 smaller HVAC units on each container, we can then play a delicate dance and use our monitoring systems to only turn on certain HVACs as required and keep others off, and not run all of them at once. So this facility will undoubtedly fit within the noise ordinance as outlined, and we don't expect any issues with that. So that's an introduction to the facility. I know that we received some comments back from the township in regards to asking for some additional studies and specifics, of which we are happy to provide all information for that. Those type of questions were all common, kind of what we expect as we proceed, with permitting. And then just for the benefit of the group here on the line, I have sent out some postcards to the community, just introducing ourselves. We know the importance of being a good neighbor, especially, we've been around in the storage facility since its inception, and we'd like to continue to be a good partner and, continue being a good player in the industry. And that all starts with our community impacts at the local level. So as good of a project as we can develop from our desktops, we know that outreach to neighbors is important. And so it's a big reason why we set up the website to answer questions, sent some postcards out introducing myself, our company, provided my contact information. I've had a couple good conversations with folks, and would like to just offer up that my contact information is available online, and would happy to set up any additional conversations one-on-one if there are other questions on the facility. There are a handful of these facilities operating. Off the top of my head, I don't know where the nearest one is to this facility, but that could be a follow-up. They are a field trip to one of these. I was a little less than impressed being there in person, because it really is just a steady state project with a bunch of containers that sit inside fencing that you can't really see from outside the fencing. But with that, I'll open it up to Chuck, if you'd like to add any comments, anything I missed glaringly, just doing a high-level overview of the project. Happy to have you chime in, and then open it up to questions.
No, Matt, thanks. You did an excellent job of kind of an overview, hit all my boxes. And I know we've got, like you mentioned, the comments from the township that we are, addressing internally, and we'll get those back to them. So this point of the meeting is just more of a giant overview like you did, and curious to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, this is John Swart. For this particular facility, I looked at your application on the PJM website. It looked like it was 200 megawatts is what you're sizing this one for?
Yes.
And how does that scale versus other installations? Bigger, smaller, average?
Yeah, right now I would say it is on the larger side of a project this advanced in the PJM queue. However, there are projects equal and greater size that are in the queue now. And to your question, just for the benefit of the group, so PJM being the 13th state energy regulator, they require that independent power producers, so every type of energy generator is required to go through a rigorous study process to ensure that a facility can connect into the grid. And that process, there are a couple key outcomes. One, the process lays out what the cost would be associated with a generator connecting onto the grid in that specific location. And all of the studies are released to the public. So you could go to the PJM website and look by location, battery storage as the facility type, and see the results of this facility. And so one, they determine what our cost is to connect to that existing substation. And it is a little bit of a science slash cross your fingers and hope that you get good results in terms of what the costs will be for the generator. Because if we overload any of the nearby system, whether that's transmission lines, distribution lines, inverters, as the generator, we are responsible for the cost of those upgrades. They call those network upgrades. This facility specifically has identified 0 network upgrades. So a project at this scale to not trigger any upgrades is ultimately best case scenario, especially for ratepayers, because we are going to be using, if you could imagine, the electric system is like a water pipe, and some pipes are full, and so you'd have to completely rip it out if you're going to add more water to it. The system nearby in this area could support this facility with 0 additional costs, which is a big win from a siting perspective. It's something that we were hoping for while we studied the area prior to entering the queue. And after 2 years of studies, that has really been the result. So PJM will study, in that study process, the third party there is the utility that we are interconnecting with. They're an integral part of that study process. And the other part of that process is really laying out then the scope of work and ensuring reliability that the facility can operate here at this substation. So yes, a 200 megawatt facility is, for a facility this advanced, is larger. However, it is going to be more commonplace because lithium-ion batteries are just seeing drastic cost declines. So I think we've already seen a lot of IPPs submitting similar size projects. There are larger projects than Energy Mountain that are operating today, a few out in California, I believe. So it's a very scalable project because it's modular in nature. You can just continue to add these storage containers, and the inverters then scale with the storage containers. So from an economic perspective, it is better to scale the project and increase it in size, especially because you're going to have some fixed costs, such as our project substation and the facilities required to interconnect to the substation. So in terms of project sizing, it will vary from storage facility, from ours. to another facility in New Jersey. And our company developed projects from 5 megawatts all the way up to 250 megawatts. And it's really, the size of the project is dependent upon, you know, what we view from an electrical perspective to provide the most value for a specific area. And also land availability. If we only had 2 acres available, then the project would be, 20 megawatts or so. So it's a combination of many factors why this facility is the size that it is.
How many of your battery storage containers do you need to get to 200 megawatts?
Currently, the number on our site plan is 128. I think our site plan kind of incorporates a worst case scenario in terms of technology, so that we can show the township and the neighbors, this is what the site would look like, you know, if we use yesterday's technology and had the most impacts possible. But depending, you know, because manufacturers are kind of always updating the latest and greatest cells. As we proceed closer to construction, that might change to a smaller amount. But I think this is a good middle of the road number. Currently, it's 128 containers.
And your connection voltage is going to be 69 kV, so that'll be your interconnection to PP&L. So you'll have your substation on your side, and then PP&L will have some construction on their side of the fence to connect into you.
Yes, exactly. And that is what the PJMQ process will determine, kind of where our scope of work ends and where their scope of work starts for connecting the 2 facilities.
All right. Anybody have any more questions for Matt here before we move forward?
This is Andy. Just one question. Matt, does anybody stack containers?
Yeah, the 2 main types of designs are these containers, which sit on their individual pads, and then the industry, you know, as well as GlidePath, we're kicking around the idea of having like a large warehouse building where you would then have the lithium-ion battery stacks inside that facility. I think this is the better, currently, you know, as it stands today, this is the better design from a safety perspective and from a cost perspective, because each individual container, because it stands, you know, alone, if there were any concerns from an operating standpoint or a temperature sensor is not ideal, we can really isolate that easily into one container, or even at a smaller level to one cell, or inside the one container to one compartment area. So this really allows us to keep the noise at a smaller level, to help our first responders in the instance that there's some irregularities with you know, a few battery cells. So they don't get stacked, and I think that's probably just from a constructability perspective, and also just to separate the units for you know, operating purposes.
Thank you.
Matt, this is Alex Ulmer. I've heard you mention safety a couple times. Is that fire? Is that really the big issue here?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. So yes, these just like your lithium-ion battery use in your computer, your cell phone, electric cars, they do want to run at ideal temperatures, and that's to make sure that we don't overheat them. And from a performance perspective, not that safety isn't our number one issue, because it's our number one issue, but we want to optimize the temperature of these units, because that optimizes the performance of the batteries. So that's really probably from an operational standpoint, the primary feature of why we keep these at the ideal temperatures all the time. But the concern, worst case scenario, would be that a battery cell starts overheating, and those can be isolated. And there are, in each container, because they're specialized, there are various fire suppressant measures to help basically remove the oxygen, contain that battery, disconnect it from the facility, and isolate the incident prior to it overheating and causing any type of fire or anything like that. And I should mention, and this is something that's still on my to-do list, but just given the nature of where we are in our permitting status, but getting feedback and working with local responders is a key element of every one of our projects. And so I'll be reaching out here shortly to our first responders to let them know, hey, this is the type of facility that we're proposing. Here's what's at the site. This is the best practices in terms of fire response, and an iterative process and ongoing as well, to make sure that throughout the life of the project, if there's turnover with first responders, that we can provide continual education.
Matt, have you had a good safety record? Have we had any accidents? What is the potential?
Yeah, not in glide path. We've had an A+ safety record. There was in the industry an explosion event at one facility in Arizona. I think I saw a little comment about that. That was 1.5 years ago. It has been extensively studied. There is a public report, about 200 pages, a 200-page report to identify kind of exactly what went wrong. And at the risk of saying the wrong thing in a public meeting that's being recorded, I will generally say that it was some operational error in terms of installation, and there was some operational error too when the first responders responded to the scene. Generally, these containers are not meant to be open. They usually are never opened unless they're shut off, and I think that was a key part of it, which introduced new elements into the overheated cells. So that led to an unfortunate event in Arizona, but it has been extensively studied, and publicly shared, just as any incident in an industry would be, because it's important for everyone to learn from that.
And this is I have a question on the regulatory aspects. Glide path, or this project, will this be a PUC regulated facility, and does this require FERC approval?
It just cut out on the very first part of your question. Will it be a PUC regulated facility?
Correct.
It's regulated by PJM, who is ultimately regulated by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So our primary permitting path here is through the local township, whereas we don't need to go through the PA-PUC. In some states, for independent power producers and power generators, the state level PUC just takes all permitting authority. But here, my understanding is that the primary permit is received through the local township. But in terms of other regulatory bodies that are involved, the entire facility is in, I'm gonna blank on some of the specifics of the code, but we design these facilities. The most recent fire code is the 2018 fire code, which includes battery storage facilities. 2015 being the previous fire code. So we will meet all code requirements. They meet all the electrical code requirements, the regulated utility PP&L. They have stipulations for interconnecting their facilities, how high these poles need to be. So it really is just following a lot of existing regulations to design the facility.
Right, but is FERC approval typically required, or is that all handled with PJM?
Yeah, that is through the PJM-Q process. So the result of the PJM-Q process is an interconnection agreement, which is signed by us as the project entity, the utility that we're interconnecting to, and PJM. So it's an agreement between the three. And that is all done under the FERC umbrella.
All right, but I'm still not. So let me backtrack a little bit here. We have a gas compressor station project in the township, which specifically is receiving FERC approval to authorize the project. Is that the case here, or is FERC just associated to the project because they regulate the industry?
Yeah, there might be some nuance there that I'm not hitting correctly. So I can follow up on that just to see, do you know if that facility is proposed by the utility or is it an independent power producer?
It's actually a gas compressor station.
Yeah, it's a subsidiary of a utility.
Okay. Yeah, I can follow up if that's all right, just to.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, as Matt mentioned, all these independent power producers sign what are called three-party agreements, as you mentioned, with the utility, with PJM, and then with the developer. And PJM files all those agreements with FERC. So there's no specific FERC approval for each project. It comes under PJM's jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Matt, Alex Ulmer again. The kind of triangular thing over towards the, I guess, northwest corner of the substation, the way the plan's laying out right now, is that where your transformer is for this project?
Yes. Yep.
And one other question. How many watt hours did you say this facility was capable of?
It's a 4-hour battery. So that would be if you were operating at its peak, it could be 200 megawatts for 4 hours.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions from Planning Commission members? We can get rolling into the review letter.
Sounds good.
You're all good. All right. Why don't we jump in this review letter? Yeah, I mean, the first item is, you're going to, given a classification that the zoning officer believes you're going to be in, you're going to need relief from zoning hearing to have this project. I want to make sure you're aware of that.
Yep.
Hang on one second. I'm sorry. All right, so let's roll on down through this if you don't mind. You have the letter handy? Matt?
I do, yeah.
All right, so if you don't mind, why don't you take the lead with the letter here, and we'll hit each point. Unless it's a will comply, just let us know it's a will comply.
Yeah, I think our approach here is to take some of this feedback and, you know, kind of sit. Yeah, yes, we'll go through line by line. Hold on, let me pull up I have notes for it, but
Matt, I've got it handy.
I think,
Want me to run
okay,
through
yeah,
it?
thanks. Yeah, so Chuck, maybe you want to drive this portion and then I can just hop in, but for the most part, when we reviewed this, I think we will comply for most of our responses, and we just had a couple questions or clarifications on a few of the points, but yeah, we can go through it.
Sure, I can go through it pretty quickly to not have us on here all night long, but number one, we understand that we will need a variance for relief. Number two, we understand and we'll make those calculations and ask for relief if necessary. Number three, we will be looking into that subdivision ordinance, and I'm sure we should be able to meet all those dimensional requirements. Number four.
Could I interrupt on number 3? I'm sorry, this is Steve, the engineer. So, is your intent for ownership of this property? Are you going to own this fee simple? Are you leasing the property, or what's the intent?
Yeah, leasing the property.
Okay, we'll have to.
Lease purchase or just a straight lease?
No, just a lease. Yep.
How do you know? Are you willing to say how long your lease is for?
I believe it's in total, if we execute the option, it would be a 30-year operating lease, and I could confirm that, but that's typically our standard number.
All right, we may have to research a little bit how that plays into the subdivision issues, but
right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think we're open to, you know, complying with however the township kind of views that.
All right. Well, the one thing to take note of is not necessarily only your property, but what's left of the Sheets property. You know, in this area, the way our ordinance is written, the property is naturally subdivided by the road. So even if the Sheets have 11 acres left on the other side of the road, the piece that's on the small side of the road technically has to meet the minimum lot requirements.
Okay.
Got it. And that was one of them we were a little more research on.
Thank you.
And number 4, looks like we will comply to that. The only one we may ask for relief on number 4 is the rear setback. And that would be because we prefer to get this closer to the substation, which would allow more of a setback to the existing residential area, to allow for more buffering and so forth. Number 5, we would adhere to. Number 6, we would adhere to. Number 7, looks like we would comply. Number 8, we would comply. Number 9, we would comply. Number 10, we would comply. 11, we would comply. 12, we would comply. 13, we'd comply. 14, we'd comply. 15, we'd comply. 16, we'd comply. 17 we comply, 18 we comply, and 19 we comply.
All right. So obviously your first hurdle is going to be getting through zoning hearing.
That's understood.
Chris, I don't know that we need to talk about it in length, but just want to highlight again some of those end comments about the road.
Okay.
If they've been to the site, they've noticed that this is not a substantial road that this facility is proposed on.
Right.
And it's not easy to get to and from that road. So that would need to be considered in those comments related to traffic studies and possible improvements to show that this site could be safely accessed with, heavy truck traffic.
And you're saying you're thinking a 12-month construction period? Matt?
Yes. Yep. And for this, if there are concerns too with the road condition, we're happy to have discussions about a road use agreement as well to make sure that, we're covered there.
All right. Any more questions from Planning Commission members? I know I was going to ask for public comment at the end of the meeting here, but I know there's a lot of people that want to chime in. I'm sure you've guessed that this probably is not the most popular project for the residents in the area. And I believe they have some things they want to bring to light or bring to the table. So if you bear with us, I'm gonna open the meeting to questions and comments from the public. So anyone who's online with us now, if you have a question or a comment, type it in to me or to Greg, and we'll give you a minute or two.
Well, I already have 3 so far.
Okay.
I will start off with them. Give me 1 second here. The first one is from Cale Heyman, 843 Simmons Road. Greg, I'm unable to make the meeting tomorrow night, but for the battery storage proposal at 25 Branch Road, I would like to know the plans of battery removal once they are abandoned, and also the equivalent amount of energy storage per unit compared to a stick of dynamite for a comparison of the amount of energy being stored in the event of any type of explosion near my house.
Well, I certainly don't know how to answer that.
Well,
Matt,
Sorry, I don't know. I've never heard that comparison before. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if that's a appropriate comparison. I don't know if those units convert, but the first question, Greg, would you mind asking that first question again?
Sure. I would like to know the plans for battery removal once they're abandoned.
Yeah. So the whole site after the useful life will be decommissioned. These containers, like I mentioned, they are 53 feet long, 8 feet wide, 10 feet tall, so they can be removed quite easily. And the cement pads are not substantial, so the entire project will be decommissioned after its useful life.
okay.
Would you like me to go to the next public comment?
Yes, please.
1 minute, Greg. This is Alex. Quick question, Matt. Does this system require any kind of bonding for decommissioning? Matt?
Is that question for me?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do these systems typically require bonding for decommissioning?
It really depends on the area. The total cost to decommission is quite minor in nature compared to wind and solar, where the facilities are a lot larger and span greater areas. So in a large scale wind or solar project, it's pretty typical to include some type of decommissioning agreement that starts at some time period throughout the life of the project. But for these, I think the overall cost to decommission is quite minimal. But we could discuss that further.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Greg, you want to read the next one?
Sure. The next one, Greg, this is Steve Tronoski, 931 Cat Hill Road. Has some questions, concerns, proposals that he'd like addressed. Number one, what data can be provided regarding the fire history of these type of facilities? Lithium-ion batteries are inherently a fire hazard due to the thermal runaway. And there's a fire facility in Arizona several months ago. What is the record on this overall? Question number two, begin with fire and gas build up in the container explosions, possibilities and industry record. Number three, noise levels from 100 feet or so containers for cooling. Number four, how and what is the impact on impervious surface? This is taking 11 acres of farmland and there's enough runoff in the area. Thank you, Steve.
And I will, as we kind of refine the project here and provide more information, we will have more specifics where we can get into the exact fire safety mechanisms for this facility. So if I can answer these questions broadly, and they will be applicable to this specific project, but I know there's some additional detail that we're going to have as we continue to refine the site plan. So if that approach is okay for me to provide some kind of higher level answers, then I can kind of proceed answering some of these questions from the public, if that's all right.
I would agree with that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so fire safety, I have talked about this kind of throughout the presentation. These things are designed, with the state-of-the-art battery management system. That is our 24/7 monitoring system that has multiple fail-safes and connectivity. That's where we monitor the voltage, temperature, and other data all the way down to the battery cell level. We have various fire suppressant measures at each one of the containers. They are all isolated, every container from each other, so there's no such thing as a runaway from one container to the next. So albeit the facility is 200 megawatts and contains 128 containers, the fire risk is no different from if we only had one of these specialized containers because of their isolation from each other. So from that perspective, the scale of this project really doesn't increase the fire risk at all. And a fire response plan, will be developed in coordination with the local responders for this specific site. We do have multiple pages of detail in terms of the specifics of fire safety measures at these facilities and how we can isolate and monitor all the way down to the battery cell level. I don't have that in front of me specifically, but that would be part of the EMS plan that we typically develop for each one of these projects. Industry record, I kind of briefly talked about that, and I know there was a mention of a facility in Arizona, so I kind of covered that. The noise levels, will fit well within the ordinance for these noise levels. Again, there is already an existing electrical substation that is adjacent to our site, so the sound is not going to be all that different from what currently exists. And with our individual monitoring of the HVAC units, we can turn those on and off appropriately to make sure that we're always maintaining the correct noise levels. This is also ambient in nature. There's not any loud bangs or clicks or unique sounds. The landscaping and fencing plan will also attribute to helping decrease the noise levels. That's also one reason that we are thinking of requesting a variance for the rear setback so that we can move the entire facility closer to that electrical substation to, again, just design the facility better for the neighbors. And impervious surface, so most of the entire facility, except for the cement pads, will allow water to drain through it. So there won't be additional impervious surfaces beyond the cement pads that house the containers. But that providing more detail is something we mentioned that we would comply with as part of the response from the township.
Was there another part of the question there, Craig?
That was all from the one public comment. I have more.
Okay. Why don't we move forward with more?
Okay. This is from Michael Brodeur. These are the concerns for the proposed diagram. Number one, drainage of the water off the lot into a stream near the south central portion of the lot by paved portion of Branch Road. Number two, height of lights and luminances, candles or lumens. Number three, fire truck access to the building from the northwestern portion of the 128 battery unit site where there's two one-way roads not connected. Number four, it's a branch road to handle the water off, as a current stone portion has always been deteriorating, which can be seen now with paved portion being undermined right now by the stream. Number five, property values adversely affected. Number six, what are the lessons learned from the New Jersey site? Number seven, spill/leak controls, provisions for individual cooling units. Number eight, height of the surrounding walls, fence, and maintenance expectations. Number nine, is there a requirement for a second access to the area, say from north or farther west of the proposed entrance? What is number 10, what is the actual noise level downwind of the unit, mainly to the east and south? Number 11, is there a requirement for trees to be cleared on the adjacent lots, even with the current setback of 75 feet and 50 feet, depending on what portion of the plan is being looked at? Number 12, is there tax benefits to the local township? Number 13, if there, after 30 years, a decision is made to move away from this, who is financially responsible to remove the units, put it back to its original state? There is more questions, but I have to scroll down to find them.
Wow. Do you, I mean, some of these questions have been answered already. Matthew, are you able to decipher through which ones still need to be answered?
Yeah, I think I captured them in my notes. And Chuck, if you wouldn't mind chiming in too in terms of drainage. Sure. I know we have a handful of studies. So that was my 10-month daughter getting curious running in here.
Yeah, we'll be Westwood Professional Services, an environmental service company, and we will be performing the hydrology report and preparing a stormwater management plan that will address any issues of drainage, make sure this site does not have drainage on any abutting properties, and that will obviously need to be approved by the township as noted in their letter.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, I think fire truck access, we'll discuss with the local responders. We've already mentioned Branch Road and our willingness to have further discussions about road use agreement. The height of the lights. So this facility is not lit except for safety lights at the primary entrance to the facility. Those will have your typical features to make sure that there's not light spill out to additional areas, but the facility is not lit up at night, so it really is the visual impacts are quite minimal at daytime and night. Property values, we don't have any information that has suggested property values would decrease from any of the existing sites. I think the adjacentness to a large existing electrical substation is not going to materially change property values in the area. We've covered decommissioning and taxes. I have not had a specific conversation with the tax assessor yet to examine the exact impacts.
Is that all of them?
There's more.
Okay.
Let's see. Is the facility to store energy generated via fossil fuels? Can there be restrictions put on place for renewable energy sources versus promoting fossil fuel usage?
Yeah, good question. You can't. So this question could get really technical quickly, but the electric grid has a bunch of transmission lines that connect large amounts of energy throughout the region. And then from all those transmission lines, through substations goes down into distribution lines, which then deliver energy to residences, commercial buildings, industrial companies. Once electrons get onto the grid, they just move to the path of least resistance, just like water would move through pipes to the path of least resistance. So there's no way of deciphering the individual electrons to say, we're only going to accept electrons from wind or solar facilities. So we can't break it down to that level. However, battery storage is a really critical part of advancing renewable energy integration into the electric grid for a variety of reasons. But the primary reason is that wind and solar right now today are by far the most cost-effective forms of energy at the utility scale. They are much lower than any other type of generation type, and they are intermittent in nature in that the wind doesn't blow constantly all day and night, and the sun doesn't shine all hours of the day. That intermittency needs to be solved with a storage component to the grid. So battery storage is absolutely a critical role in helping integrate renewable energy, and will further it's just the beginning, really, honestly, of the transition into a 21st century grid that is more high tech, more reliable, more cost efficient, produces less greenhouse gases, less waste. So facilities like this are going to continue to be sited, to be built, to be part of that electric grid. The best place to site them are adjacent to existing electrical substations that reduces the need for additional infrastructure. We could site this a mile away, but then that's just going to increase unnecessary transmission lines that ultimately are passed along to the ratepayers. So siting these next to existing electrical substations, especially given the impacts of that existing electrical substation already to the area, adding a static state battery storage facility with containers is fairly minimal change.
And then the last two questions from Michael are, how will the large individual storage units be recycled? And what the outcome of the Phoenix, Arizona explosion, April 2019 at the battery storage unit managed by GlidePath?
Yeah, the Arizona facility was not part of GlidePath, and the large storage unit. So there are probably two parts of the recycling and decommissioning process. There's the actual lithium-ion battery cells, which are often repurposed and recycled. There's a large industry that takes batteries and recycles them. And as far as the containers, I don't have the specific vendor provider which the container would go to, but I would presume that their use would there would be a secondary market for that.
Next is Cliff Cole, who sent out an email saying that he would like to speak for himself.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Cliff Cole. I represent a small group called the Citizens for Clean Air. We are currently in opposition to the compressor site that Steve mentioned. FERC is not our friend. There's supposed to be a regulatory commission that helps protect citizens and but we're not getting that. So a lot of the things that Matt says rings a little bit hollow to us, but I have some questions, comments, concerns that I would really hope that the Planning Commission and the engineers of our township and the supervisors will consider. One question I have is, what market does this serve? And a follow-up to that is, why does it benefit the citizens of West Rock Hill Township? We're going to have to live with this monstrosity. But what market is that for? Do you want to answer that question, or should I say all my questions, Craig?
Cliff, why don't you let him answer one at a time?
Okay.
So, Matt.
Yeah, so this facility would be interconnecting to the PPLE substation, which that utility participates in the PJM power market.
Okay. And so, but what is the greater area that this covers for? I mean, it's not just for West Rock Hill. We're a pretty small community.
That's correct. Yeah. Just like every power generator within PJM, it depending on how you contract that facility, PJM is a 13-state market.
Okay, but it's true to say that this is more targeted to the greater, like, Philadelphia metropolitan area, correct? Is that a fair assessment?
the entire PJM market is one marketplace for energy. So all 13 states, there's one liquid market where electrons are bought and sold.
Okay. This question was already answered to a degree, but it would be better for us to understand. I hope that the Planning Commission will consider, where is this energy coming from? We're cloaking this in this Green Mountain thing, and you said at the very beginning of your presentation, you mentioned renewable energy, but I'd like to really understand what percentage of renewable energy is actually going to be charging these cells, or is this just mostly going to be fossil fuel? Because all the same benefits, I mean, although I do agree with you that for green energy, the sun doesn't shine, all that, and the wind isn't blowing all the time, but you have the same infrastructure benefits for coal generated energy and for other fossil fuel energy.
Yeah, I think I hear your question in there. One, let me just pull up here.
Matt, while you're looking for your answer, can I chip into that as well, since I'm very familiar with the PJM market? Cliff, PJM determines the fuel mix. They determine how much nuclear, how much coal, how much gas, how much solar, how much hydro, all goes into the grid on a daily basis. If you go to the PJM website, pjm.com, you can see there what the current mix is of power, what the energy sources are. What this facility is doing is just buying electrons off the wire. Matt and his company have no way of determining where those electrons are coming from. That's determined by PJM.
Okay, then my point is that just don't cloak this as a green project then, if that's really what the truth is.
I guess I will state that this actually is part of renewable energy, because the way the current grid provides reliability and capacity for any time that you turn the power on is that there are right now the plants that provide some of this capacity services and spinning reserves, so that the grid is reliable, are fossil fuel generators. And so because anytime there's a peak demand, there needs to be enough energy on the grid to meet that demand. And traditionally, the grid has been set up by using fossil fuel generators. So spinning reserves, they call it that because you actually have fossil fuel generators that are constantly producing energy because they don't have the operational capabilities to turn on in a millisecond, or to turn on in 5 minutes, or to turn on in 15 minutes. So those facilities are burning extra fuel, extra coal, extra gas in order to meet those demand spikes or when the voltage drops. And though they get paid capacity payments to sit there and burn fuel in order to meet these peak demand. Battery storage actually displaces the most expensive energy units on the market, and those most expensive energy units on the market are also the highest greenhouse gas producing units because they're old, dirty fossil fuel generators. So this is very much a green energy play. It is absolutely integral into further integration of wind and solar. And
okay, I got it. But the key here is that our small township is not the reason why all this energy is being used, and you're taking pristine farmland, and we live in a quiet community. You say you're calling me from Minnesota. Do you want this thing next to your house? And we have the same problem with the compressor and the HVACs. that they're going to make noise. Okay. And you say, okay, well, we're going to be within the code. We're going to stay within the code. Well, can't you do better than that? Can't you do, if you really want to be a good neighbor, can't you make it so they're completely quiet? And you can't tell me that they don't burn up sometimes, because they do. And lithium-ion batteries have a terrible record for that. And okay, you tell me, well, you're not the company that had the problem. Well, that's what we hear from the pipeline companies too. Okay, the pipeline companies say, "Oh no, that was the Mariner project. We're not those guys." And it just, I'm sorry, it just rings hollow for me and other people in this township. And I just have one more point I'd like to make, is that you mentioned cost for putting this next to a substation that's already there and whatnot. Well, there's got to be substations that are in industrial parks, in industrial areas of Philadelphia, that would be much more better suited than putting this in a rural farm area. And how is this cost benefit? Am I going to see that on my bill? I have a hard time believing that. The cost is going to be, lower cost for PP&L and their affiliates.
Was there a question there, or was that just a comment?
It's a comment, and I'm more of a comment. Well, it is a question. What you mentioned, that it's a lower cost. How am I going to see that on my bill? Am I going to see,
Yeah, that the cost that you pay as a ratepayer is a mix of the entire generation mix in PJM, which includes every power generator, the cost of transmission assets, services. It's a large mix. One 200 megawatt facility is not going to be specifically identifiable on your individual electric bill.
Okay, so that's why I say it rings hollow when you say, well, gee, we need to put it in here. Well, put it a mile away. I mean, it's not going to make that much of a difference to me, but it makes it's a big difference to PP&L or whoever the other third party people are. So, you're putting this in, as I say, do you want this in your backyard? I don't think you do. Okay, thank you. That's all my comments. I appreciate it, Greg and Steve and Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you. You have any more, Greg?
Sure. The next one is from Chris Link. I heard a lot of talk about emergency vehicles on the last topic. I think this project presents a much greater issue here due to both the size of the road and the inherent fire risk presented by these storage batteries.
So that's just a comment, not a question?
That's just a comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Next is from Matt and Trish Croyle. We are strongly concerned about the safety of our families in this community. Also, Branch Road is a narrow one lane. There is no way trucks can go up and down our road for 12 months. Several firefighters were harmed in the Arizona explosion. We do not want this danger in our backyards. These are just a very few of our many concerns.
Okay.
Then this is again from Matt, 113 West Branch Road. Many of the surrounding community members have asked some terrific questions. I'm the property owner directly right next to this proposal. My property connects to the Sheets property. My question is simple. Would you like to place 128 10-foot high, 50+ foot long batteries that would make noise and close the fence next to your house? We moved to this property because of the views, wildlife, etc. So again, would you want to stare at this?
We'll take that as a rhetorical question and move forward.
Yes. And then have more questions from Michael Brodeur. Greg, would Lonely Road need to be expanded or considered for widening by the committee to handle the fire trucks in a worst case scenario? Yes, the road is wide, but it's not that wide. A comment from him too. Why is there a need to put this station next to a power station when all you're doing is hooking wire to wire? Sites in the Midwest are located away from power stations. The location is only for Energy Mountain. And that is all the public comment.
Okay. Did we need something answered in that last one? About the
I think it was more of a question about is the road safe enough? Will it need to be widened? I think that's here. Would Lonely Road need to be expanded or considered widening by the committee to handle fire trucks in a worst case scenario? That was a question.
Okay. Well, that's a to be determined, I would think. All right. So we have no more questions from the public. Do we have any more comments or questions from the Planning Commission members?
Yeah, this is John Swardick. I thought of another couple of questions for Matt. For your step-up transformer, will you have a oil containment basin around that and a fire suppression system for the transformer in case it fails?
I would have to verify that with my engineers.
Okay. You have more questions, John?
No, that's my last one.
Okay.
This is Tim Ruth. Matt, are you currently looking at or assessing any other sites for this project in the area?
We have had other land under contract, but this is our preferred site given its proximity to the substation.
Are those other sites in West Rock Hill Township?
No, not currently. The other site was, if you're looking at that map, just at the base of the kind of upper left corner of that map, as you can see it on the presentation. But the Sheets property is from a siting perspective, the best.
So the other site you were considering is adjacent to this?
Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's on the kind of upper left side across that field, which is in a conservation easement.
Okay, but I guess my question was more like do you have any other sites identified in the area that would take this one's place if this were not feasible or doable or permit, if you can't obtain the permits for it? Do you have any other sites identified?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Chris, Tony here.
Yeah, Tony.
I have a question for Matt. In the paperwork that I got here, it's a twofold question, but the fire retardant, the Novik 1230. The question I have, I don't know if Matt could, if you could describe with the fire what happens, because everybody in that area has a well, and I don't know how that fire retardant is contained in the container or what have you, because I know some comments came out, about low-lying areas and water runoff and such. But if I'm not mistaken, isn't that fire retardant part of the halogen family? With fluorine, chlorine, because we have problems elsewhere in the township with PFAS and contaminated water. And that's, could you tell me what happens with a fire and how that is contained? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I do. So in terms of the specific, some of the specifics is going to be, I'll need a response from kind of my engineer to get into some of the details there. But For the most part, the fires are contained within each individual container, and those containers are not opened in the event of a fire. So there's really nothing that would spill out. I believe generally what happens is there's the process removes the oxygen from the container, which then removes any of that fuel. The containers remain shut, and it just uses the energy that the fire basically just ends up going out. So the fire response is quite contained, actually, in the event of a fire to one specific portion of one container.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, anyone else? Okay, well, I think it's time to move forward. You obviously are, you're very preliminary here. And you need to talk to zoning hearing. So I guess the ball is in your court at this point. Obviously, you've seen the concerns of the people in the neighborhood. And as a planning commission member, I sympathize with them as well. But we'll see what zoning hearing has to say. Do you have any other comments, Matt, or I forget your other guy's name?
No. I just want to thank everyone for their time, their questions, their concerns, their comments. We really appreciate it. These are all very normal questions that we go through, especially when there's a new type of facility like this. So thanks again. We'll follow up with a lot more detailed information about this project to answer a lot of the specifics for the questions that were raised. My contact information is available, so we'd like to answer more questions on an individual basis. Happy to do that, and I'll make myself available.
All right. Good enough.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good night. All right. Moving on. Old business is next on the agenda. I don't know that we have any old business. Anyone have anything? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. Any new business? I have none.
This is Alex. I have none.
This is John. I actually have a question for Greg or Steve related to the last project. I saw in the notes that you classified this as manufacturing because it didn't meet the criteria for utility. Why didn't it qualify for utility? Just curious. Not that it makes a difference.
They don't have a PUC number. Regulated by the PUC.
Okay, so if it would have been a traditional utility, that was a PUC member, it would have been utility. But since it's an independent power producer who's not a registered transmission or generator supplier within Pennsylvania, then it's not. Okay, I get it.
And if it was a utility, they would have to go to the zoning hearing board too for a
right.
And I would just add to that that's based on our definition. Realize, John, some other township might have a different definition and it could be called something else. But as far as our ordinance, we key the utility use to a PUC regulated utility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, on that subject, still here too. This is Tim. What do you think the FERC implications are on this, Steve, if there are any? I mean, he didn't seem to have real clear answers on that, or
But
Neither do I. That's why I was asking.
yeah, this is John again. FERC deregulated the generation business years and years ago, so it's an open market for anybody that wants to participate in it for generating electricity. Now, these folks are doing it through battery storage, but I mean, you and I can form our own company and decide we want to go into business selling electricity, and we work through a PJM process that's been approved by FERC. So FERC doesn't approve each individual project; they just approve the process.
But this doesn't potentially fall under the same auspices of the compressor plant, right? Or does it?
No, because so this is being built through a
Yeah, this is
competitive open
generation.
market. This is generation, right?
All right, not distribution. Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's hopefully a plus, huh?
And that's what I was, just trying to get to was what regulatory approvals do they need? And that's, as John said, it sounds like it's all handled through PJM and not necessarily other regulatory agencies.
Does PJM have the powers that FERC does?
PJM puts together their proposal for how they want to run their business, and that proposal is approved by FERC, and FERC regulates PJM, but PJM then in turn administers their process. So they have this open market competitive process for buying and selling power. They have a process for potential developers to get onto the PJM market. As Matt mentioned, there's a rigorous process that PJM has in place for when a developer comes along. The utility, in this case PPL, identifies what's the interconnection cost. These folks are actually spending about $1.5 million to connect to PP&L, and PJM also determines if there's any other system upgrades required that would be passed on to the developer as well. And that whole process is approved by approved by FERC, but managed by PJM.
Okay.
Thanks for the tutorial there, John.
That's what I spend my daytime doing.
This is Cliff again. Am I allowed to ask another question, or is?
I'll tell you what. Let's get through this, and then we have public comment again at the end here.
Oh, great.
All right, but no problem. Yeah, I'll let you all back on. Yeah, anybody else on the planning commission with comments on that? If not, Steve, the engineering update, there's nothing that we need to be worried about.
No, there's nothing of note on there.
Okay. Anything coming in?
Well, TH Properties will be back sooner than later. They're working on their plans. And actually, Dave Nice will be back. I understand. I got a call from his engineer that they're trying to work through their PennDOT permit issues. So he does intend to come back and try to comply with our latest comments.
David Nice down here by the RNS?
Yeah, the pole building that he put up.
That's still not complete?
Nope.
Huh. Okay. All righty then. All right. Well, seeing nothing there, we'll go to public comment. I believe Mr. Cole is.
Yeah, I'm hard to shut up, aren't I?
Okay.
So look, I just really have a question for everybody that's on the planning commission and the engineers is why would West Rock Hill Township want to allow such a facility? It just doesn't, I saw the 5-year plan that we put out, that we had the Bucks County Commission put out. I had the same question about the compressor. The answer I get from the supervisor for the compressor is that, well, we don't really have a choice because FERC is making us, is regulates it and we can't stop it. We can only, but in this case, what is the benefit to West Rock Hill Township here? And, I asked that to, and I know you're probably not going to answer me, but I asked that to Jim, and Jim made a few months back, there was a really great presentation on solar energy and how the township is trying to be net zero with our but I'm not I'm not really seeing it with this. This is a big monstrosity that could go somewhere else. Why does it have to go here?
Well, Cliff, not to get to the heart of your question, but the reality is the township under Pennsylvania planning code requirements has to entertain any application that's made to the township. Doesn't mean they have to like it or not like it, but if someone makes an application through the proper channels, the township has to follow a review process and at least entertain the application. So when you say, why would we even want this? We may not want this, or may not want a lot of projects that come through, but there's a process that has to be followed in this. If they want to make application to the township, we have to listen to it, and we have to follow the approval or denial process.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I don't see how they're gonna have to have some kind of variance for zoning and whatnot. I don't see how this project fits in.
Oh, certainly they'll need variances, and they may never get through the zoning hearing board stage of this, but they'll make application to the zoning hearing board, and the zoning hearing board will have to hear it and have a series of hearings and go through the process. They can't just turn it down summarily in the beginning.
Okay, I got that. I understand that. But okay, so then
2.5 minutes are up.
Well, let's just go back to it being a rhetorical question for you guys all to consider when you're making your votes or whatever, however the process works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Broder. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Thank you. There's a backstory to this whole situation here. Whether the current property owner that is considering this, I realize we have certain requirements for preserving properties and whatnot. In light of that information which I'm presenting, which may be out of line, is there not some type of provisions in place for the town to try to help a local farmer whose family and whatnot has owned the properties, and the properties have several that are in existence now on Cat Hill and Lily, so all originally part of his property, going way back to the 1950s and whatnot, a way of helping the farmer out. This is going to put financial stress on the farmer. And Energy Mountain is known for targeting these type of locations. That's why I kind of threw a question about the lessons learned from New Jersey. Because you go through the public comments and whatnot, they're kind of broached.
I'm sorry. I had a hard time understanding your comments. I apologize. Not that.
We're at this point just because of a farmer in our area struggling. And I realize he doesn't, I guess, qualify for the land preservation process, but his property not being big enough. That's why the Sopel's property qualifies for the land tax breaks and all that, but he doesn't, even though he's adjacent property.
This is Jim Miller. Can I add a little bit there? I'm on the Sustainability and Renewable Energy Subcommittee for the county. And I can tell you that there are programs being developed for farmers for sustainable farming. If you can get me some names that you would like me to contact, I can try and get them pointed in the right direction. Okay. The
owner of the 11-acre lot we're talking about here.
Okay. The county commissioners have not moved forward yet on their decisions on how we're going to do this, but like I said, they are looking at it's a problem through everywhere, and Bucks County's really struggling right now. So they are looking heavily into how they can help sustain the farmers, help the farmers sustain their living. So anyway, I'll see what I can do.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Jim again. Cliff, thanks for bringing up the project we're doing because, we're gonna, in 45 days, we are going to be 100% renewable energy running on from our solar field up to the township building. But I don't think that has anything to do with the way this flows through. If it did, I would have concerns about it myself. But I do not. Let me take that back. I do have concerns about it, but that would have been even more concern. The point I wanted to make though was we have to take a good hard look at this, and like it was said before, this has to go through the process. So let's just let it go through the process, see where we're going with it, and we can all attend the zoning hearing, right? When it comes up. I also wanted to, Chris, I'd like supervisors to meet and discuss HOAs versus public roads. I just want to take a fresh look at that because there was a lot of questions about that tonight. So maybe you could join us in a conversation like that at some point.
As long as it's legal.
Yeah. That's what I meant. I wanted it to be a legal meeting. No, in the back room, Chris.
On tape. But yeah, I would enjoy that.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Hearing none, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
This is Alex, also motion.
Okay, Alex made the motion.
Andy, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.